I'm Rob.
And I'm Sarah. Join us as we chat about the light side of heavy vehicles.
What's your 20?
What's your 20? It's brought to you by the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator.
Welcome to episode 8 of the What's Your 20 podcast. Yeah, today it's a bit of a serious one. We're looking at prosecutions and court outcomes. I hope none of you guys have actually had that problem, but we'll talk to Paul from NHVR and he'll be able to point us in the right direction. And what have we got? Truck trivia. Here's a question for you. What is a wiggle wagon? Let's do a little segment we'll call Truth or Lie. We might learn a bit about each other, I think. So, Sarah, give me one truth and one lie. I'll see if I can work out which one's which.
Yes, definitely. It'll be interesting to see because I am a terrible liar and I'm glad that some of our listeners can't see my face because it will probably be a dead giveaway as to which one is a truth and which one's a lie. So I'm going to tell you two stories and either one of those is going to be false and you're going to have to guess.
Let's do this.
So first story is in my career, I used to have this habit of naming trucks and, which each one had a personality. It was a good truck or a truck that was built on a Friday. One of those was Kath Day Night from Kath and Kim. I also had Charlene from Neighbours and I also had Ralph Wiggum from The Simpsons, if anyone out there has been listening to that.
Did you choose that truck?
Yeah, I did. That's it. But there were many moments where I thought I'm in danger. So that truck was, the one that was probably playing up the most or the most unreliable at the time. The second story I'll tell you is I used to actually do skip trucks early on in my career and I used to frequently visit multiple times a day a recycling facility, which is obviously a tip.
A tip, that's right, yes.
Yeah, these guys used to break down old concrete that had a Rio mesh into it and make it into like 20 mil road base and then basically sell it to other counterparts in the community that want to use it, whether they're doing dam walls or bridges or whatever else. One day I pull into the yard and there was another gentleman that came in his truck who was also delivering a load of mulch because they used to do that there as well. Anyway, this guy, typical trucker, jumps out of the truck. He's got little stubbies on, but they're not the knee-length stubbies. They're the extra short kind.
The short ones that my ex-wife threw away.
That's it.
Can't be wearing those.
And he had the Jackie Howe on or, your blue singlet and his Akuba and, he nudges the other fellow that worked there, which was Dave. Anyway, and he looks at me and he gives me this strange look across the paddock and he goes, geez, that girl must have diesel in her blood. So from then on, I actually had a nickname and it was Diesel Blood. So which one do you reckon is a truth and which one do you reckon is a lie?
Diesel blood doesn't sound very realistic. These trucks you named, what were the names of the trucks?
So there was Kath Day Night, Charlene and Ralph Wiggum.
And Diesel blood. Okay.
Is it my nickname?
I think it might be the nickname. I actually think it might be the nickname. I reckon you're the kind of person who might name trucks, so I think that might be true.
Well.
I've got a feeling the skip truck part is correct.
Yep.
You only go with the nickname.
Yeah, well, you're actually wrong. So,
really?
Funnily enough, I have this terrible nickname that gets around.
Diesel blood.
And they call me Diesel Blood. That's how you're going to say it.
Yeah, Diesel blood.
Yeah.
They've got a rapper name that goes with that.
Probably. Do you have a industry nickname?
No, I don't think so.
Not like Robbo or Free?
Not that I know of, but I'm sure people call me some things, I'm sure. Okay, I've got two for you. Many years ago now. Back when pre-internet and all those things, we used to not have the facility to move money around the way we do these days. So there used to be things called bank runs. And I was once apprehended by the police for bank robbery.
No way.
And my other little story is trip down from Ararat, heading back down towards Terang. Little whiff of smoke coming out side of the truck. It's not dust, it is smoke. And suddenly we're on fire. We've got a wheel bearing collapsed. And next thing you know, the trucks are going up in flames, as is the paddock next to it.
Oh, wow.
Which of those do you think might be true?
Oh, well, I think you've shared with some of our listeners, you're good at hitting couches and, chaos. So I reckon the truth is the fire in the paddock. And I reckon the lie is that you got done for, money laundering or bank robbery.
Well, reality is the wheel bearing story is actually a friend of mine, or ex-work colleague that happened to him.
Yeah, wow.
No, I actually got apprehended for bank robbery.
No way, that's crazy. Wow.
It was after hours. We used to do the banking and money exchanges between branches back before that was it. I mean, all those little vans used to run around doing all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've come out of the bank with a couple of Barclays bank bags, and police have come from both sides and grabbed me and to the ground.
Oh, no.
Yeah, apparently they forgot to disarm the silent alarm as they let me into the bank. So they arrived just as I was walking out with the bank bags.
Wow, they must have thought you were a brazen criminal coming
Yeah,
out
that's
so
right.
relaxed.
They sort of straight to the ground, and the manager come running out the bank going, no, stop, he's our courier.
That's so funny. Yeah, wow. Well, I never would have picked. We love hearing from our listeners and our drivers about some crazy stories that have happened to them. So if you have any interesting stories you'd like to share with us, we'll leave a link in the show notes and we'd love to hear from you.
If you've been apprehended.
Or caught a paddock on fire.
Either one.
We would definitely love to hear your story.
What's your 20?
So, Rob, we've got a little bit of a serious topic to discuss today. So we've got prosecution and court outcomes.
Something we don't want to be involved in particularly, but sometimes it happens.
Yeah, definitely. Have you ever had any experience with a prosecution or a court outcome? Or
I actually haven't, to be honest, thankfully, which is probably a good thing. These things can sneak up on us, though. Sometimes you can find yourself in that situation without any kind of, idea it's coming, put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I've probably been similar boat to you. I haven't ever had to be a respondent for, a prosecution or a court outcome while working in transport, but I've certainly in my career been on the other side, collecting the evidence and preparing those briefs or, those statements for this information or those offences or issues in the chain, I guess, to then go to prosecutions to potentially go to court.
I imagine it's a very intimidating situation, actually, from both sides of the fence, really.
Yeah, and I think it's especially hard because people, they're not sure of the process. They're not sure where they can get information. I know that the NHVR does have a segment on their website that talks about court outcomes and what the process is. And there's some really good information because I guess the process, even though we're a national heavy vehicle regulator, it changes from state to state, which is really interesting. So, I guess different courts have different processes. So, I guess that's a really good, helpful resource to go on and check that website out.
Yes, well, it should be a very interesting topic, I think.
And also for operators as well. So we have Paul Alsbury here today with us. Paul is the Executive Director of Statutory Compliance at the NHVR. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
It's a pleasure, Sarah.
Are you able to give us a bit of information about where prosecutions sit and how they fit into what the NHVR do?
The prosecutions area, in many ways, is at the end of a lot of processes. So matters may be referred through from investigators at the NHVR, safety and compliance officers who, as you know, do a lot of on-road enforcement. So they detect a lot of contraventions and offences. And also, in some cases, law enforcement agencies like policing agencies in the jurisdictions. So they get referred through to prosecutions. And of course, once it goes to court, then courts who are independent, completely independent of the regulator, get to decide whether someone is guilty or not guilty of the offence and also what penalties should be imposed.
I think there's a big misconception in the industry about maximum penalties. So I probably want to start off with that one. In the law, it says, you're going to get a maximum penalty of, say, $100,000 for an offence. And people think, oh my gosh, that's the fine. That's what I'm going to front up to court and get. Are you able to explain or unpack that a little bit more about what a maximum penalty is and how that works?
Yeah. Well, look, maximum penalties are set by the parliaments. They give a bit of an indication of where offences sit in relation to other offences. But as a sentencing principle, maximum penalties are reserved for the worst type of offending for that offence. But the lesson is, very rarely does a court impose a maximum penalty, and more often than not, it's sort of going to be around about the 10% mark.
So you obviously sort of oversee a lot of these prosecutions across the country, and the HVR obviously is getting a bigger and bigger sort of step across the country as far as the states now. So is there anything that's recently sort of come up, which like an example of a prosecution which you're able to talk about?
it's a primary duties prosecution. So as you'd be aware, people in the chain of responsibility have a duty to ensure the safety of their transport operations. And one of the major parties is operators. So this matter related to a heavy vehicle accident between a heavy vehicle and a car. Really, really sad because the driver of the car died and the passenger was seriously injured. So New South Wales Police took action against the actual driver of the heavy vehicle, but what we were interested in was the employer, the operator. Because as it happened, and this is really, really sad too, the driver had serious health conditions, including end-stage lung disease, and that required supplementary oxygen 24 hours a day. And 2 oxygen tanks were retrieved from the cab of the heavy vehicle. And what had actually happened was the driver had suffered from a cardiac event just prior to losing control of the heavy vehicle. So really, really sad. And what the investigation revealed was that the company had very poor or non-existent safety policies or procedures in place. The penalty imposed included a number of aspects, but one was a fine of $1.2 million and the other was a supervisory intervention order.
The acronym for that is SIO.
That's right.
Are you able to explain a little bit more about what SIOs are?
They're an order that a court can make when a company or a person is convicted. So the trigger is if the court thinks they are a persistent offender or at risk of becoming a persistent offender. So the supervisory intervention order, or the SIO, is sort of does what it sort of sounds like. There's a supervisory period up to 12 months where there's a number of conditions in place around, addressing risks in relation to practices and policies or staffing in relation to the operator, or maybe implementing certain technology, things like that. They're where a court accepts there's a sort of ongoing risk and there's a need to sort of manage that ongoing risk. Now, it's a big fine, but
huge.
We would rather that the accident happened in the first place, to be honest. And a lot of what the regulator does relates to prevention and really trying our best to make sure these things don't happen in the first place. It's important because of that. It highlights the duty that operators have and others in the chain of responsibility have to ensure the safety of their operations. Also highlights the importance of fitness to drive. And, drivers and their employers really, really need to be careful about that and make sure any medical conditions or other things that might impact fitness to drive are managed properly.
With that circumstance in itself, like most heavy vehicle drivers have to pass a medical, whether it be, every year or every 3 years, depending on their age. And if that driver was to pass a medical through the licensing system, whether the next natural step, I think, would be that, the operator would have some kind of control mechanism about where that driver could potentially drive, if he was even capable of driving, whether he could do other duties in the yard or whether he could use a forklift or something, is probably like a really big question mark. So I think without prying too much in the particulars, like had the operator put any of those controls in place, like before this event had occurred?
Look, there were very, very few controls and certainly nothing that was appropriate for the actual circumstances.
Yeah.
But it also highlights the fact that you can't rely on one thing.
Yep.
Even if you're having yearly medical tests, a lot can happen in a year, can't it?
Yep.
I suppose that's one of the things about the primary safety duty. It's a shared duty.
Yeah.
And drivers generally aren't in the chain of responsibility, I should say. But they obviously have a duty to make sure they're fit to drive. But lots of people have this duty, this primary safety duty, depending where they are in the chain. If you're a party in the chain of responsibility, you can't just sort of defer discharging the duty to someone else.
That's right. Yeah, but as a vehicle owner and to operator as well, you wouldn't want somebody who you don't feel comfortable driving your vehicle, you'd think. I mean, like when you hear stories like that and you think, did nobody in the company think to themselves, we've got a $500,000 vehicle there that's going to be travelling down the road, not to mention the freight they're carrying and the liability and everything else involved. Maybe this driver's not the person to be doing it. And, having nothing in place to mitigate that happening is quite frightening, to be honest.
Yeah. And look, a safe operator is a productive operator, and an operator that's likely to be around, next year, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. Being unsafe and not taking the appropriate care to ensure the safety of your operations, it's just bad business at the end of the day.
Thinking about different factors that the court needs to consider when sentencing operators or drivers, what were some of those considerations that were taken into account in a prosecution like this?
Speaking generally, the starting point is always the actual offence. How serious was it? What's the maximum penalty? So let's keep in mind that the heavy vehicle national law has been introduced into the participating jurisdictions by the state parliaments. So these are all laws made by parliaments, and when parliaments set maximum penalties, they're giving a bit of an indication of how serious the offence is.
Severity, yeah, exactly.
Relative to other offences. The circumstances of the offending, what were the safety risks caused? Was there any harm to people? That's a very important aspect. Was there any damage to infrastructure? How culpable was the offender? Was this a deliberate act? Was it carelessness? Was it just an oversight? Was it part of a course of ongoing offending? Was it part of a sophisticated scheme? So all those sorts of things go into it. Courts are often mindful of how common the offence is.
Right.
Because if some sort of offending is getting out of control, then a court might think a heavier penalty is warranted to deter that type of offending.
So I imagine there's a lot of sort of thought put in before it gets to court too, in the sense that I'm sure the NHVR has a sort of fair bit of leeway as far as working out whether it's something they want to follow up with or not. It might be like a clear breach of the law, but is it something which is worthy of prosecuting?
I come back to prosecutions being one tool in our compliance toolbox. So in some cases, prosecuting might not be the best tool to use.
Right. And you also mentioned obviously a lot more in the way of operators rather than drivers sort of facing this sort of situation. Obviously, there are some drivers who find themselves in the situation where they're being prosecuted by the NHVR. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, they've received something in the mail, obviously, or something sort of saying that there's a notice to appear for court or whatever else. What is their way of going about that? How do they navigate sort of responding to that?
Look, first of all, it's an option to engage a lawyer. That's something they may or may not want to do. And, that's fine. But some people may choose to go it on their own. Yep. The correspondence that comes out from our prosecutors will sort of explain what the charge is about and what procedural avenues are open.
Yep.
In many cases, someone doesn't actually need to attend the court.
Oh, really?
If they want the matter dealt with by way of a plea of guilty, there are other options other than just attending court.
Yep.
So if you are going to attend court, think about what you're going to say, because the magistrate or the judge will be interested in what you have to say. They don't just want to hear one side of the story.
Yeah. Because I imagine most people receiving something like that in the mail would be terrified, to be honest, whether they're technically guilty or otherwise. The first thought is, what happens now?
Well, that's right. And as I said, they want to sort of hear both sides of the story. So if you think if you turn up to court, there'll be lots of yelling and you'll be screamed at and things like that.
You can't handle the truth.
Well, look, that's probably my favourite court scene of all.
Yeah.
And I've prosecuted a number of matters over the years, and that has never happened, unfortunately. But it's not as bad as you think.
Is it as cut and dried as there's the right and the wrong? Here's the law and you've breached it, or are there mitigating circumstances that can be taken into account? Or
there are often mitigating circumstances, and they will vary from case to case.
Yeah.
And look, the other thing is, if you think you haven't committed the offence, if you think you've got some sort of defence or excuse, or if you think the prosecutor's missed something, and of course, sometimes there's something that's known only to the defendant. No one else could know it. So raise those issues. There's no point going and having something resolved by a court and then thinking the next day, oh, I really wish I had have raised this or what have you. And I would never want anyone served with court proceedings to think they were powerless, because that's just not the case. That's that may be the case in some countries. It's not the case in Australia.
So it's the beginning of the process, not the end of the process.
That's right. That's right.
Now, we've had NHVR CEO Nicole Rosie come onto the podcast, and she's spoken about HROs or high-risk operators before. How does the NHVR Statutory Compliance Division hold these high-risk operators to account?
The thing about high-risk operators is often there's an imminent or immediate risk to safety. So that really, really worries us. So we're really very concerned. So there's a laser focus across the agency. Everyone's involved. In terms of statutory compliance, so the division has investigators and prosecutors. Investigators are doing a lot of work, again, in collaboration with other areas of the agency, going in and having a look at what's going on in companies, what practices, policies, procedures they've got, where the risks are. Now, an investigation may take some time, but we have other avenues to address risk, like prohibition notices and improvement notices. One of the things that we're doing is we've had a concern that sometimes people just see infringement notices as a cost of doing business. I'll take the risk of being over mass, and if I get an infringement notice in sort of one trip out of 20, then it's still I'm still coming out on top. So we're having a look at those things, and in a number of cases, instead of infringement notices being issued, we're actually taking the matters to court to put before a magistrate, and that exposes the person or the company to all the sanctions available to a court. And there's not just fines, there's other things like injunctions and supervisory intervention orders that courts can resort to. Commercial benefits penalty orders is another one that courts can resort to, just to make sure that an appropriate sanction is delivered, again, based on how serious the offence actually was.
Yeah, and I think those kind of sanctions are appropriate because, like, for everyone in industry that's, trying to meet bottom line margins and do the best they can safely, when you've got someone that, knowingly and willingly does the wrong thing and then making a profit, like, that's such a good way of, levelling that playing field as well.
Yeah, and your question was about high-risk operators. That's really what our concern is in relation to that.
Yeah.
There are too many fatalities arising out of heavy vehicle accidents. They're people's families, family members, friends.
That's right. Every statistic is actual person.
It's an absolute tragedy, that in 2026 we've got a road toll like we have.
Owner drivers technically an operator as well as a driver?
They are. They are also.
So it's anyone who's got control of the business, control of the vehicle.
That's right.
The system's in place to,
Yeah. But what I will say is that, the drivers aren't irrelevant, because if you're an operator and, you've got a number of drivers that are getting infringement notices for fatigue, let's just say fatigue, then that gives us a bit of an indication that there are issues within the business. It's not just one or two drivers who are doing the wrong thing. It's starting to look like a more systemic issue, that comes down to sort of the policies and procedures, the practices, the culture within the business.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There's a big difference between making an error every now and then, or even just people consistently over a whole company making an error occasionally, as opposed to a systemic, you will do this, so therefore you are knowingly entering false information to make it possible to work more hours.
Yeah, so that just highlights what I'm saying. If you're worried about something, worried about whether you've actually done what's been alleged, reach out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a lot more education. This is what I've said before. With NHVR taking the reins for compliance, there's a lot more education now rather than just the big stick. It's like, you've broken the law, here's the big stick. It's explaining to people, what they've done wrong, what they can do right, how they can change their operating to make it compliant.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and to understand statutory compliance and also what prosecutions do at the NHVRs.
You can use NHVR Go to apply and track applications for access permits, accreditation, PBS and vehicle standards. Check out NHVR Go or find out more information through the links in the show notes.
What's your 20?
The answer to this week's truck trivia question, Rob, what is a wiggle wagon?
Yeah, I had no idea on this one, to be honest.
I actually heard it for the first time early on in my career, coming across the flat. But I'll give our listeners the answer because they've probably been, desperately waiting all episode to find out. So a wiggle wagon is a combination with two or more trailers. The wiggle refers to the way that the trailers can sway or wiggle behind the truck, especially when taking turns or driving in windy conditions.
Yeah, well, I can understand that now, having coming towards you. I know up around Hillston when you got three trailers coming towards you, and you got to try and zig while they zag and all the rest of it to stay on the blacktop.
Yeah, definitely. I would have to say that B doubles are probably excluded from that group, but yeah, definitely. A double road trades above.
Yeah. Well, like I say, it's the ones coming towards you I've got to worry about.
Yeah,
not
definitely.
me.
It's a little bit scary when you're looking down, the centre line, and you just see this trailer at the end, just dancing across that line and going, oh, how am I going to navigate this coming, in a cab over at 100 k's an hour towards each other? But, yeah.
Just think of that line out of Brown Dog, when he says about all the trailers trying to overtake each other.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly right. But yeah, the first time I had ever heard it, it was someone asking, copy of the wiggle wagon, can I come around you? And I didn't even know what they were talking about until I realised, there was another truck coming around me on the highway. So thanks for tuning in, guys. That's a wrap on episode 8 of What's Your 20. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like more information about the recent prosecution that Paul did mention, we'll link the news story into our show notes.
Yeah, anyway, keep it shiny side up and we will see you in the next one.
What's Your 20 acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands across the nation. We acknowledge that many of Australia's major road networks are attributed to First Nations peoples, having used star maps as waypoints in their journey throughout Australia's harsh terrain to reach landmarks such as watering holes. We pay our respects to elders past and present and to emerging community leaders.
The views and opinions expressed in What's Your 20 podcast belong to the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the NHVR. The content shared is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice.